On December 7, 1941, history witnessed a day that would forever alter the map of the world. A disaster was about to strike the naval base that no one could have foreseen. An African-American cook, Doris Miller, aboard a battleship, serves breakfast to Navy officers at sunrise and then goes about his task of collecting their laundry. At exactly 7:57 a.m., Doris hears a siren, one that no one in service would ever want to hear. He immediately rushes outside and is shocked to see the sky filled with Japanese bomber aircraft. In an instant, the entire naval base seemed to be under siege, as the Japanese aircraft began systematically destroying American ships. This attack was on Pearl Harbor, and today we will learn why Japan had the audacity to attack a powerful nation like the U.S. We will also understand why Doris Miller, a cook, was awarded America's highest honor, and why the U.S. later launched a nuclear attack on Japan. Our interesting story begins in 1941, during World War II, when the U.S. had risked everything to protect China. Yes, the same China against which the U.S. speaks openly in 2024. By then, 3 years of World War II had passed. On one side were Germany and Italy, while on the other were Britain, the Netherlands, and France. The U.S. was completely neutral in this conflict, as it wanted to avoid involvement in wars in Europe and Asia, due to the heavy losses it had suffered in World War I. However, there was one nation that was constantly provoking the U.S., and that was Japan. Due to a lack of natural resources, Japan was rapidly taking over its neighboring countries to fulfill its resource demands. Japan had already occupied large parts of Korea, Taiwan, and China, and had its eyes set on the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. The problem was that Malaysia was a British colony, Indonesia belonged to the Netherlands, and the Philippines was a colony of neutral America. These countries did not approve of Japan's actions, especially since Japan was backed by Hitler, who was an enemy of Britain and the U.S. In response to Japan's aggression, the U.S. imposed an oil embargo on Japan in July 1941. Since Japan imported 80% of its oil from the U.S., this was a major blow. The U.S. presented Japan with a condition. It would only lift the embargo if Japan withdrew its forces from China. This was a tough decision for Japan. On one hand, withdrawing from China would mean that despite Hitler's support, Japan had surrendered to the U.S. On the other hand, without oil, Japan's situation would worsen. Japan decided not to withdraw from China, but instead secretly planned to occupy Indonesia for its oil. However, this was not easy, as Indonesia was a Dutch colony, and to get there, Japan would first need to capture the Philippines, a U.S. colony. Japan knew that if it attacked the Philippines, the U.S. would retaliate from its nearby naval base at Pearl Harbor. But with its oil reserves dwindling, Japan had no choice but to launch an attack. The Japanese military leaders decided to carry out a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor to cripple the U.S. fleet, allowing them to easily capture the Philippines. Japan quietly began preparing for the attack, assembling a fleet that included 2 battleships, 39 submarines, 30 destroyers, and 414 bomber aircraft. These aircraft were launched from 6 aircraft carriers towards Pearl Harbor. On the American side, Pearl Harbor had 8 battleships, 59 anti-aircraft ships, submarines, and 390 aircraft. Despite this formidable force, the U.S. was caught completely off guard, as Japan had kept its attack plans top secret. On the morning of December 7, 1941, at 7:57 a.m., 350 Japanese aircraft launched a 2-wave attack on Pearl Harbor. The Americans, completely unaware of the impending attack, were devastated as the first wave rained bombs on them for 45 minutes before retreating. It seemed like the attack had ended, but just 10 minutes later, a second wave of bombers arrived, unleashing even more destruction. The attack lasted a total of 1 hour and 15 minutes, during which 20 vessels, 8 battleships, and over 300 planes were destroyed. One of the battleships had onboard Doris Miller, the African-American cook we mentioned earlier. While collecting laundry, Doris heard the siren and rushed outside. Before he could react, a Japanese torpedo hit his ship, injuring the captain and several officers. Doris heroically moved the wounded to safety and then manned an anti-aircraft gun, shooting down 6 Japanese aircraft despite having no formal training. For his bravery, Doris was later awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest honor in the U.S. Navy after the Medal of Honor. The Japanese aircraft eventually retreated, but the attack had already drawn the U.S. into World War II. The day after the attack, the U.S. declared war on Japan.
Since the unprovoked attack by Japan on Sunday, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
For the next 3 months, the U.S. focused on restoring its naval base, and fortunately, many ships that had sunk in shallow waters were repairable. 4 months later, in April 1942, the U.S. launched its own attack on Japan by bombing Tokyo, marking its first offensive in World War II. This was just the beginning, as the war between Japan and the U.S. would continue for the next 4 years, with the U.S. gradually gaining the upper hand. By 1945, Japan was severely weakened, but still refused to surrender. Finally, in August 1945, the U.S. played its final card. On August 6, 1945, at 8 a.m., a Boeing B-29 Superfortress dropped a 4,400-kilogram bomb called Little Boy over the city of Hiroshima. The bomb exploded 43 seconds later, turning everything white. A fireball rose into the sky, raising the ground temperature to 5,000 degrees Celsius. This was the first nuclear attack in history, and it obliterated 80% of Hiroshima. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, the U.S. dropped another atomic bomb on the city of Nagasaki. This bomb, named Fat Man, weighed 4,670 kilograms and completely leveled the city. These two bombs resulted in the deaths of approximately 140,000 people in Hiroshima and around 74,000 people in Nagasaki. These were the only two nuclear bombs ever used in warfare, and they forced Japan to surrender, ending World War II. If you want more such videos, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss any video. Thanks for watching.